Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I'd like to welcome you to my demo on exploring XQuery. The XQuery language is a lot of fun, and you can do a number of things with it. And you could probably teach, I could probably teach a course on XQuery all by itself. Might not be a full semester course, but it'd be a pretty substantial course. And all we're going to do here is take a tour, right? And you may notice that you don't have an assignment that accompanies this demo. And that was really done on purpose, okay? It's really a lot to learn at the very end of the course. And what I am going to do is I'm going to distribute the files that I create during the demo, and I'd encourage you to download it and to open it up and to play with it a bit and maybe do some stuff on your own. But for the most part, I just want you to be aware that the capability is here. Now, what are the use cases for XQuery? Well, the two main ones that that I see, the one that's getting a lot of usage is one that we're not particularly interested in, and that is this. You can query a relational database with the XQuery language, and you can very easily generate either an XML document or an HTML page or an XSLFO document. So there's quite a few people who have their data in relational databases, and they have their publishing workflow is using either HTML or XSLFO, and they use XQuery as an intermediator to get the data out of the relational database and into either HTML or XSLFO in a really kind of easy way. And when you see how easy it is to format a document that we're going to have be the result of one of the queries that we do, you'll see that, geez, that's a pretty interesting approach. But that's not what we're going to be doing in XML for libraries for the most part. I think that the real use case for us is the following. We have a bunch of documents that we've been given that we are going to want to ingest into a digital library. Okay, maybe they're metadata documents, maybe they're documents that have metadata embedded in them. And we want to get a sense of what we have here. We have this digital corpus with a lot of files, and we want to list all the files. We want to check if they've got proper values in certain of the elements in the XML documents. We want to do all that kind of handy dandy analysis that you would do to clean up the corpus before you ingest it into some kind of a repository or a digital library. Okay? So here's what I've done in order to simulate that. I have created here in my virtual machine under our course ID a demo of XQuery, and I don't have the whole directory structure set up, and I don't have an Oxygen project file or any of those things. You get to watch me do that. But what I do have is I have a bunch of XML documents. And when I say a bunch, I mean a bunch. Okay? So I called this the metadata archive for XQuery. I generated it on my Windows laptop because that's where I have all this data. And I put it into a zip file and I brought it over here on a thumb drive, and I attached the thumb drive to my virtual machine, and I got it up, and here's the zip file. I double clicked it and I unzipped it into this. Now, what are these things? Well, these are metadata files that I have created from the MP3 files that have made up all of the audiobooks that I have listened to in about the past, say, 7 years, something like that, 6 years. Okay, so that's about 500 audiobooks. That's a lot of audiobooks. And these are audiobooks that I downloaded from a consortium that we have here in Northern Illinois of public libraries, and you can download the MP3 files, and you can use those to load them up on something like your iPhone, like I do, and you're able to listen to them. And as soon as I got these things, I thought, geez, I'm always looking for a metadata application. Maybe what I'd like to do is to hang on to these files and then write some code to extract the metadata from the MP3 files. So about 2.5 years ago, I wrote a series of Java programs that used a Java library that was from a fellow in London that was an open source library. And the purpose of the library was to give you a bunch of tools to extract metadata from MP3 files. And he's got some other capabilities with regard to MP3 files. And it was called MP3 AGIC, as in magic for MP3. And I did a lot of work with that. And what I did is I created a series of Java programs that go through the archive that I have of all these MP3 files, and they extract the metadata. And for each MP3 file, I create one XML metadata record. Okay? So let's see. Let's just look here. One of the books that I listened to was called 206 Bones. So let's just open that. And that's going to open up the Oxygen XML editor. And you'll see my last project, which I'll get rid of here, but here's a metadata record. And who designed this? Well, I did. Okay, so I set up the tag set here. And I called the root MP3 metadata. Okay. And then it turns out when I did some research on the metadata that is inside MP3 files that there are two generations of metadata tag sets that are in MP3 files that I was interested in. One set is called ID3 version 1, and the other one is called ID3 version 2. So I created two sub-elements, ID3 v1 tag and ID3 v2 tag, and these are the things that hold the two versions of the metadata that are in the MP3 file. And so what I did is I ran the program and I went at these things one file at a time. I walked through the directory and I examined them one file, one MP3 file at a time. And I did the calls to extract the metadata, and then I wrote out the XML document, which you see here. And this is a pretty good one in that it's got really both sets, and that's not uncommon as it turned out. The artist, who in this case is the author, is Kathy Reichs. This particular file is just part one of, I think we saw that there are maybe 7, something like that, that were there. It's called 206 Bones Part 1. The album title, which is usually the title of the book, is 206 Bones hyphen Temperance Brennan, who's the lead character, and that's the series, I guess. We don't have data for a year. We don't have, we do have a -1 for genre. And one of the things I did when I did this is, even though in XML, normally when we don't have data, we leave the element out. We make it an optional element. I really wanted to see what I got. So if in fact I did a call to the code and I got back a year and it was just empty, then I put an empty element here. Okay. Now, whether that's a problem with the code that I got from my friend in London or not, I don't know. Okay, so I did a call for a year, and it came back with an empty element, so I gave it an empty element. Genre description is unknown. There's a comment, etc. Okay? Now, what's interesting is if you look at the version 2 tags, they typically contain better metadata. Okay, so the artist, still Kathy Reichs, the title 206 Bones Part 1, same thing. But look at album, 206 Bones hyphen Temperance Brennan series, comma, book 12. That's pretty good. So I thought that that would be nice. Eventually, I'd like to create some application that keeps track of all the books I've read and all the series that I'm interested in. And I'm not going to say all the books I've read, all the books I've listened to. Okay? So, and then if you look at the comment, you'll see that the comment is really a whole blurb that came from the publisher about the book. Okay, this is typically the comment that they use at the consortium site to describe the book before I decide that I want to borrow it. Okay, and it's probably true that the comment is the intellectual property of the publisher. Okay, and I extracted these data with the idea that we would use them for research. So I'm going to share them with you with the same understanding. But that's what we have here. So this is a pretty good one. Okay, now let's set up our project. Okay, so let's do this. Let's say we want a new project. All right. And where do we want to keep it? Well, we don't want to keep it in that subdirectory. We want to keep it in the outer directory. So how do I do that? Well, I can go... I guess I'm going to have to walk my way to it. No, I can look at this directory here. And I'm going to be in demo XQuery. Okay, and there it is. There's my subdirectory with all the files. And by the way, there's over 4,000 of those files. There's over 4,200 of those. Okay. All right, I've got that. And what do I want to put in here? Well, I want to put a folder, and I want the higher thing here. I don't want the metadata archive to be my folder, but I want the demo XQuery to be my folder. So let's go to Documents and work our way down to demo XQuery and say that's my folder. And demo XQuery is going to have a lot of things in it, but it has the subfolder. It has all these. As you can see, there were 8 parts to 206 bones, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my XSLTs. Actually, they're not XSLTs because they're XQueries. I'm going to put them in here. All right, so I've got this, and I'm going to save it. Okay, so how do I want to do that? I want to say project, save project as, and I'm going to make sure that I put it in this demo query one. And it says it's already there, so I'll say, okay, I just want to replace it. Just want to make sure I have all the information there. Okay, so let's close the Oxygen XML editor. Okay, and now let's go back up. Let's walk up this thing. Oh, and here's my project. So now I'm going to open my project again. And on Mac, I need to do this to get it to come up. Alrighty. So, what am I going to do? Well, let's just do a little exploration of what we can do with the XQuery, okay? So, and I have to emphasize that some of the capabilities that we have here are implementation dependent, okay? So what implementation of XQuery are we using? We're using an implementation from Michael Kay. He's the fellow who has a company called Saxonica. He's the guy who wrote all the XSLT transformation engines, and he's a mover and shaker in XLT and XPath. And he also happens to be a mover and shaker in XQuery, so he's got a bunch of XQuery engines as well that are coming from the company called Saxonica, and the name of the engine is also based on the name Saxon, which is not too surprising because Michael Kay is a Brit. Okay, so what are we going to do here? Well, we want a new file. So let's say we want a file, new, and let's go into this thing that says new document. And if we go around here somewhere, we should find something for XQuery. XQuery, right there. And create it. It's going to come up, it's empty. All right? So it turns out that XQuery is not written in XML. Okay? It's a language that is, it looks a lot like, and it was actually styled after the query language for relational databases, which is called SQL, or sometimes referred to as SQL. Okay? So, what are we going to do? Well, we have these things in XQuery which we call FLWOR expressions, and they stand for the keywords that you can start out your lines of the query with. F4, L, let, O, order by, W, where, R, return, FLWOR, So as you go through the demo here and watch, you'll see that we're going to have fors and lets and returns. So this one that we're going to do now is just going to have a for, a let, and a return. Okay. So we're going to say for, and we're going to create a variable name. We're going to call it mydoc. Okay, so it's going to point to the document that we want from that whole group of over 4,000 XML documents. And then we're going to say doc, okay, and then we're going to say the name of the subdirectory, metadata archive for XQuery. And let's say we're going to do that later, okay? XQuery. And slash, and then the name of the file that we want. And we want to just take that first file that we looked at, 206 bones, part 1. So we can say 206 space bones hyphen part 01.xml. Okay, then that's that. So that's a function expression that returns a reference to the document that we want. And then we're just going to say slash slash, and then we're going to give the name of the root element, mp3 metadata. Okay, so what we're saying here is we want to point to, with the variable mydoc, we want to point to the root element metadata that is inside that file. Okay, that's good. And now we want to create another variable and we want to pick something out of the document. And what we want to do is we want to pick out the name of the album. And if you remember back when we looked at these, it's in an element called album. And we're going to take the one out of the ID3 V1 tag. So we're going to say let, and now we can coin another variable name. And I'm going to call this meta album. Meta album for the metadata album. And we're going to assign, which you do with a colon and an equal. And we're going to have a reference to where to pull the data from. So we're going to start with the variable mydoc. And it gives us the opportunity to choose that. And then we're going to say that takes us all the way down through the root in that document, mp3 metadata. And then we have to say slash, and what's the next part of the path? Well, it's ID3 V1 tag. And what's the next part of the path? Well, album. Okay? So what it's going to do is it's going to pull the data out of the element album, and it's going to put it into the variable meta album. And then how are we going to get to see it? Well, there's a return. Return. And we're just going to have the name of the variable, meta album. Okay? Well, why don't we run this and see what happens? Well, the first thing we need is we need a transformation scenario to do it. Oh, we have to save this. So let's save this. Let's call this list a specific album. Okay? We're only processing a single file, not a collection of them yet. Okay? And then it's going to give it that XQuery extension. So XQuery files, get the extension .xquery. Okay, so now let's try to set up a transformation scenario. So let's say we want a new transformation scenario. And how does it know we might want an XQuery transformation? Well, it looks at the file type or the file we're pointed at, and it's an XQuery document. It goes, oh, you must want an XQuery transformation. So let's click on that. Okay. And this gives us the same name that we had before. And I'm going to call this create a sequence. Okay, so what automatically comes out of XQuery, if we don't tell it to create something different, is what they call a sequence. Okay, a sequence of nodes. And you'll see it soon. It has a very distinctive look. Okay? Do we want to fill in the XML URL? No, we don't, because we're pointing to it from the XQuery code. All right? Do we want to put in the XQuery URL? Well, it's already taken care of. It's the file we're currently pointing at. All right, that's good. The transformer, well, it's doing Saxon PE XQuery 9.5.17. That'll probably work. Yeah, that's the only one we have the option to choose. So, oh no, that's not true. We've got HE, PE, and EE. EE is Enterprise Edition. Let's use that. That's the granddaddy. Okay? Why? Because it's included. Do we want to do FO processing? No, but we could. Okay? Do we want to control things about the output? Yes, we do. What do we want to control? Well, we want to make sure that it's coming out as one of these things that they call a sequence. That's just going to list out within Oxygen. Okay, so it's not going to create any real output file that we can save and track. We're going to do that as the next of our steps. So let's say OK. So create a sequence, and let's apply associated. And it's going to run. And let's see what we got. So a sequence really gives us an XML document, although it hasn't been turned into a file. And what did we get? Well, we got an XML declaration. That's nice. And then we got the actual element got picked out of the XML document, including the start tag and the end tag and the text in between. We've got the title of the album here, 206 Bones - Temperance Brennan. Oh, that's nice. Very nice. Okay. Let's try to do something similar, but let's try to get the name of the artist. Well, that's not too hard to do. So let's say File, Save As, and it says list a specific album, list a specific album artist. Okay, so why don't we save that? Okay, so what's going to be different? Well, the element that we're asking for is not going to be album anymore. And I'm not going to go back and show you, but the name of the artist element is an artist. Okay, and let's change the name of the variable. Instead of calling it meta album, let's call it meta artist. Okay, and it doesn't like it that we now are trying to use a variable name we haven't declared yet. And we'll change that to meta artist too, and it will like that. So let's see what happens when we run this. Now, we could just press the play button and it would run the transformation scenario that got run the last time, but let's not assume that. Okay, create a sequence is still the transformation that we want. Okay, what do we get? Kathy Reichs. Okay, Kathy Reichs was the artist. So what's really nice here is that, and I'm not going to show you like all the way to do it, but we can extract any of the elements that we want as elements, just like that, just that easy. Okay. Now, one of the nice things that you might think of is if we could just surround that artist element with some more regular elements to enclose it, we could put out a proper XML document. Okay? The only problem is that so far we're limited to the element that contains the text that refers to the artist. We are limited so far to have the same element name. So that's a little bit of a limitation, but not too bad. Okay, so we were able to get the album title and we were able to get the album artist. Let's see what we could do if we wanted to not put out one of these sequences, but what if we wanted to display this in an HTML page? Or if we wanted to work a little bit harder, an XSLFO document. All right, let's give it a try. So let's take list a specific album and open that again. Okay, and why don't we save that under another name that says we're going to list a specific album in an HTML doc. Okay? That won't be too hard. So how do we do this? Well, what's really neat is that you can take this XQuery code and surround it with kind of template text. So how do you surround the XQuery code so that it knows it's not part of your template text, part of your markup? Well, you put the XQuery code in a set of curly braces. So there's the XQuery code in a set of curly braces. And now we're going to create an HTML page. And I'm not going to put the namespace for HTML5 or any of that stuff up there. I'm going to be kind of crude. So I'm just going to say HTML. All right, so we're going to start the page. And we don't get all the help that we get when we are in the XML editor proper. And within that, we have a head element. Okay, and within the head, we have a title. Let's give it a title. Okay. And let's call this a single album title. And then, of course, we want to end title. And then we want to come back here and end the head. And now we want to start the body. Body. That's how we normally do that. And then let's put a title up there. So let's have an H2. And let's say that the same thing we said before. A single album. Album title. And we're going to end the H2. All right. And then let's put this in an unordered list. So how do we do an unordered list? Well, we put a UL. Okay. And then we're going to put each of the names of the albums, so of course we only have one, into an LI. All right. So that is going to go on in our return statement. We'll fix that later. For right now, let's get rid of our couple of blank lines. And let's go down here after the XQuery code, and let's continue with the HTML page. So we're going to put out the LI in the return. We just haven't done the change to the code to do it. So after we put out the LI, well, we have to end the UL element. Okay. And then we're going to want to end the body. Oh, I see. I didn't really indent the body, indent the code within the body. I'll have to do that in a minute. Kind of end the body. And then, of course, we want to end the HTML element. Okay? Now, how could I do this? Well, I want the UL to be indented one further. And I want the H2 and the UL up here to be indented one level further. Now they're in the right place. Okay, so this is going to do this, but unfortunately, the way this sits right now, it's going to put out an album tag instead of an LI tag with the right thing. So we don't want that. So how can we do this? Well, it's really easy. We can just type in here, we want to put out an LI tag. Okay. And then we want the following thing. We want to go back into XQuery. And the way to get the data out of the inside of the element is to use the data function. So data function, and then we surround meta album with parentheses. Now that's not going to get out the tags and the contents. That's going to just pull the contents out of album. Okay. And now we want to get back out of the XQuery language, and we want to close the LI. It's that simple. Okay? So the only thing we had to do is that we were able to provide our own markup, LI and end LI, and then we were able to use inside these curlies, which have, say that we're putting the XQuery language inside of regular text and markup. We can use the data function to pull the data out of that element. Let's see how that looks. So we're going to save that. Now we need a different kind of transformation. It's like the last one, but it's different. So let's duplicate that one. Okay. And instead of create a sequence, let's create an HTML page. Create an HTML page. Okay. So all this stuff on the XQuery is fine. We're not doing FO processing, so we don't need that tab, but we do need the output tab. And instead of taking one of these sequences, we're going to uncheck that, and it's going to allow us to specify the file name. So what could we do? Well, we can say, do we want the current file name? Nah, we probably don't want the current file name. So let's just call this a single album title .html. All right, so we save this. And we only want to run the HTML page. We don't want to run two transformation scenarios. And let's click on Apply Associated. And what's going to happen? Oh, we created, but we didn't say to open it. So let's open it. Let's go back to our transformation scenario and edit that. Okay. And go to Output. And remember where we click to say we want to open it in the browser or some kind of system application? We forgot to check that. Now let's apply Associated, and we're going to get a page. And there it is. Here's our title, single album title, and we pulled the title out of it, 206 Bones, Temperance Brennan. Well, that's pretty nice. So we could pull out anything that we wanted there. So there are people who have a preference of using XQuery over using XSLT, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you can really do pretty much the same things in XQuery that you can do in XSLT when you're working one input document at a time. Okay? But what if we wanted to work on a collection of input documents? Can you do that in XSLT? Answer, no, you cannot. You get one input document, you get one XSLT document, and you can create one output document. That's all you get, okay? So for this, analyzing a group of metadata files, XSLT can only really allow you to do the kind of analysis that we're doing here, one at a time, where we have 4,200 of them. Okay, well, let's see if we can start taking advantage of that. Okay? So, I'm bringing up my cheat sheet. Let's not go backwards. Let's keep our HTML page approach. But instead of a specific album, okay, let's create one that's going to go through all the files, the whole collection. So what could we call that? So let's do a save as. Somehow I've got a mess on my hands here. So let's say File, Save As. Okay, list a specific album, and let's say list all album titles in an HTML doc. Okay? Now, it won't take you too long to figure out we're going to have too many, because you remember that we have a file for each part. So if all we want is a list of the album titles, we're going to get a lot of duplicates. But we'll get rid of the duplicates in a couple of minutes. Okay? So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to not say that we have an individual doc here on line number 9. We're going to say we have a collection. Okay? And collection, the kind of code that we're going to give here is code that will work in the Saxon XQuery processors. If you want to do a collection in another XQuery processor, then it might be slightly different arguments inside the collection function. Okay? So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to say that we want that subdirectory, and then we can have a question mark, and then we can say, I want anything in there that ends in .xml in the file name. Okay, well that looks good. Now what's that going to give us? Well, it's not going to give us one return. It's going to give us over 4,000 returns. It's going to give us a lot. It's going to give us for each of the 4,200 files. Okay, so we don't want to call this a single album title anymore. Let's call this all album titles, including duplicates. Okay, and I'm going to copy that down and put that in the H2 as well. All right. Okay, so let's see if this will run as create an HTML page. Should run. Let's see what we get. Oh, there we are. All album titles, including the duplicates. So it goes on for a long time. So what we're seeing is over and over again, we're seeing the title. Now, one of the interesting that you'll see is that there is some bad data. There are some bad data, actually, as we would say in information school. There are some bad data here, okay? There are files that were MP3 files that we pulled the metadata out of where there wasn't an entry for the title of the album. Oops, that was bad. So, am I going to fix that? No, I'm not going to fix that. What I would say is that I'll probably go back one of these days with some Java programming and look for the things that don't have a proper title. And I'm going to go and I'm going to look at the title of this individual cut or track. And I'm going to manipulate it in order to take the part 01, part 02 out of it. I'm going to manufacture album titles where I don't have any. Okay? So I'm going to fix it on the front end, not here. So I've got that. Let's see what else I've got. They're in alphabetical order, which is kind of nice. But interestingly here, we've got between blind spot and blind sighted, we've got one with no title. Okay, so we've got quite a few missing album titles. And between Cold Case and Comfort and Joy, we've got missing album titles. And I've got to point out that this includes all the things that I listened through to the end and some things that I started to listen to and thought better of. Okay, whereas if you go to the place where I keep the repository of all the metadata, I took the ones that I thought unfavorably of and I put them into a subdirectory called unfavorable. But I've distinguished that information in the real repository, but not in this version. So you can kind of see what we have. We have a lot of files. Okay, well that's good. Now the next thing that we want to be able to do is we want to be able to get rid of the... Oh, now, here's the next thing that I want to do. Is, in theory, I have these things in alphabetical order, but they're not really in alphabetical order because I would think a space would come before a B. Okay, and that they're just accidentally coming out in alphabetical order because that's the way they're coming out of the file system. because that's the way they're sorted in the directory. Okay, well, that's not too reliable to depend on. So how could we put them into a particular order? Well, I told you before that they have this expression FLWOR, F-L-O-W-R, and it's for, let, order by, where, which we'll get to eventually, and return. So we're just going to add an order by. So let's just do it now. Order by, and let's sort it in meta album order. Meta album order. Okay. And let's run that and see if we get a different sort order. Oh, interesting. A lot of blanks. And then 206 bones. And then now it looks like it's in reliable sort order. Okay, so how many files are we going to have to fix? Well, we're going to have to find a way to fix maybe 20, 30 files. Maybe more. Could be as many as 50. Something like that. Okay, don't have an album title. Okay, now one of the nice things here is using this tool, we can find that out long before we go to ingest these into some kind of a repository. That's why I think this XQuery is a fun tool to play with. Okay? And if you wanted to play with this and you didn't want to have to replay the demo every time you wanted to do it, where could you find a reference on this? Well, there's a book that I like that I've been using ever since it came out. It's one of the O'Reilly books. It's called XQuery, and it's written by Priscilla Walmsley, who's a really bright woman from Michigan, who she's also the author of a book on XML schema that's really the best one out there. It's called Definitive XML Schema. That's by a different publisher than O'Reilly, I think. I could be wrong. But so that's the book that I go to where I want to find snippets of code to figure out the syntax for these things. That's where I got all this. And that's where you would get it. If you said, I want to give this XQuery stuff a try, what could I use as a reference? XQuery by Priscilla Walmsley. Okay, so how are we going to get rid of the duplicates? Well, you'd be surprised that if you won't be surprised if you're a person who's worked with structured query language or SQL with relational databases. We have this problem happen all the time where we get an answer set full of duplicates, and then we ask for distinct values. So there's a keyword in SQL called distinct. Well, how do we do it in how do we do this in XQuery? Well, we have to turn things around a little bit, okay? First of all, we need to get another level of variable that is going to hold the whole collection, and then we're going to have to go through the collection a little more carefully. Okay, so this line we're going to cut and put up in the front, except that we're going to use another variable name. Now, each of these files represents a track, okay? When these things were on CDs, each one was a track, okay? And that's what they tend to use as the name for these things. Okay, so we're going to say let tracks. That's not good typing. Let tracks. And then we're going to have an assignment. And you're saying, well, you can put a let in front of a for. It's a pretty easygoing language. So I think I put a colon there, but let's just, oh, sorry. I had to capitalize to get a colon. Equals collection of that. Okay, so now we have a variable called tracks that's holding entries in it. It's a vector or it's a series of things that has all of the documents in it. Okay? And we're going to need that because we can't check for duplicates in the way we want to check for duplicates unless we have a variable that's holding all of them all at the same time. Okay, and then we're going to say in the second line, for, and we're going to say album. So this is my new set of variable names. In, and then we're going to use a function name, like the collection function, and it's distinct values. Distinct values. Okay, and it gets an argument inside of parens. Okay, and where do we want the distinct values? Well, we want them at id3v1 tag / album, but we need to point to each of the tracks. So we're going to say, inside the parentheses, we're going to say $tracks. And then we're going to take down this XPath expression right here. We're going to say, okay, use that to point to the album name. All right, now we don't have to use that let line anymore. We've copied the code from it. Okay, so we say order by. It's not called meta album anymore. It's just called album, because that's the name of the variable that we're using. And we want to get the data out, but the data is not in meta album anymore. It's just in album. Album. Okay. So this is a little tricky. When I saw this code where we were doing the let before the for, it took me a while to see why it worked, and it's still a little hazy for me why the syntax of the language is as forgiving as it is. But this has to do with the fact that we need to create a variable that holds the whole collection at the same time. And then we need to get the distinct values from that variable in order to get rid of the duplicates. All right, well, let's give that a look. Let's get rid of the blank lines. Probably not going to hurt anything, but I always like to be neat. Do a save. And again, we're looking for an HTML page. So the transformation is create an HTML page. That's fine. We're going to apply that. And here we go. Now, we don't have an entry for each of the files anymore. We have an entry for each distinct album title. So the ones that were blank have all been collapsed into one. So there probably were 50 lines that are collapsed into this first line. And then I think there were 7 or 8 tracks that made up 206 Bones, Temperance, Brennan, and we've collapsed those into one. Okay, and we have them in real alphabetical order. Isn't that nice? So what has happened here is we've taken something that had 4,200 files, and now we've really come down to how many audiobooks do we have? All right. Now, we have probably 5 to 10 audiobooks we don't have an album name for, and until we fix up the data, we're not really going to get that. Oh, this doesn't include duplicates anymore, so let's change that. Let's say duplicates eliminated. How's that? Duplicates eliminated. Okay, and now we're just going to copy that down and put that in our H2 as well. Okay, and we're going to see how that goes. So let's do a save, and let's run it. And now we're getting the same things, but we've got a prep or title. Okay, and you know we're putting the same thing into the title tab for the browser, but you don't see it unless you've got 2 tabs. So you can see it now. All album titles, duplicates eliminated. Okay, I want to show you one more thing before I end the demo, because you could be at this a long time. There's so many cool things that you could do. But let's see, what if we wanted to list out all the files that have got a problem with their album name? Okay, this is, I think, it's a typical use case. You have this corpus that you want to ingest into your repository or digital library, whatever you want to call it. And some of the data is going to be dirty. And who's going to fix it up? Well, probably you. Or you're going to call up the people you got it from and say, I need you to fix these 50 files or 40 files, okay? And wouldn't it be good to give them a list? Well, this is the kind of stuff we can do with XQuery. So let's start with list all item titles in HTML. Oh, I forget to save the one that I wanted. Well, I have it on my cheat sheet. So let me find what I want. So let's do, don't you hate it when you screw up? List a specific album in HTML. Okay. So we're going to open up the one that we just had. Okay. And we're going to change things around. All right. So this would have been a lot easier to do. So this is going to be all files. Okay. We're just going to call this all files. And I'm going to go back to, I'm going to get rid of the code that I had here. So I'm going to say I have a collection. So I'm going to say for my doc in collection. So we have that. And then we had a let. So let's put that. And we're not going to do distinct values anymore. Okay. And we're not going to do the order by anymore. Appreciate your patience here. So we're going to return some code. Let meta album be assigned my doc. That's the variable. Slash ID3 v1 tag album. Okay. And then we're going to return not album, but meta album. Okay. So this should get us all of the files. Let's look. All right, let's run. Did we get all the files? Yep, well, we're getting all the files. Do we have some of the blank ones? I think we do. We went past that. So we can go past some of the blank ones. Yeah, there's some blank ones right there. So we have some blank ones too. Okay. So now we've got this. Okay, and again, I saved this I saved it over top of the last one. So when I distribute the code for this, I'm going to distribute a slightly better version of the code that hasn't had things all copied over the top of each other. This should really be called, let's call this file save as. Let's just call this all files. Okay. All right, that looks good. So that's all files. And now, how do we get information about the file? Well, there's another function that can give us the file name. Okay, because what we're going to ask for in a minute is we're going to ask for where the album is equal to blank. In fact, let's just do that. Let's do that so we can use again, it's FLWOR for let order by where in return. Okay, so where, and we're just going to say meta album okay, equal two quotes. Just say where it has a value of the empty string. Okay. Okay, so this is now, let's save this as file, save this as, let's call this all files with blank album title. Okay. I finally saved it with the right name. And let's put the same expression up here. All files with blank item, item title. All right, and we're going to pull that down and put it in our H2 as well. Now, what's going to be interesting is because they're blank, we're going to get blank answers. So let's transform it. Well, that's not too helpful because we can see we already knew they were blank, but what file do we have to go back and fix? Okay, so let's do this. Let's go back and use another expression there. Okay, instead of saying that we want the data, okay, let's say that we want another thing. Not the data out of meta album. Let's put another function there. It turns out there is another function name called fn base URI. So function base URI. And what we want to get mydoc. Okay, so this is going to get us the entire path name of the document that's bad. Now, I apologize because that's going to be pretty big. But again, it's going to be a short list of things to go fix. So let's do that. So how did we do this? Well, we're saying which file are we currently on? Okay, because here we are iterating over the files. And every time we go through, we are putting the reference into the variable mydoc. So we want to say, what's the base URI of mydoc, which is just the XQuery way to get the full path and file name of the document that has the problem. Okay, so let's save that and run it. And here's the list of the things that have to be fixed. That's not too bad. I wonder how many there are. Well, you know what we've been doing? We've been using an unordered list. Let's use an ordered list, and it'll number them for us. So OL, sorry, that's 0L, OL, and end OL. Okay. And let's run it again and we'll see how many files have to be repaired. Well, over 50, 61 files have to be repaired. Okay? But, you know, that's not bad. We've got 61 bum files out of over 4,200 files. That's not bad at all. Okay? So that is a nice thing to do. So again, the popular use case for XQuery is to extract information from a relational database. So you can have a collection and you can actually connect it to instead of a collection, you have a data source that you're actually able to connect to a relational database. There are XPath expressions for how you navigate through the database. And what our people are doing is that they are retrieving the values from the database into variable names from XQuery. And then they are plopping them out into some tags. A really popular thing when people are creating things like bank statements and all that kind of stuff is that they're putting it into an XSLFO document, and then they process that with XSLFO, and they get a really pretty bank statement. Okay? So that's the more common use case these days for XQuery. But for me, in the data science, information science, library science world, this kind of thing that we're doing here, where we're taking a bunch of files that we've been given, and we have to We have to figure out what we have. How many things do we have? What's all the data that's in them? Is it all properly coded? Do we need to come up with a list of things that need to be fixed? We could do a whole bunch of things like this where we could tell people, okay, here's a list of 61 things you have to fix in the files that you gave us before we are able to ingest them into the repository. XQuery is dynamite for this. Are there a lot of people using it for this? I think more than a handful. Okay, if more people knew that they could do it, certainly a lot of people would be doing this. And certainly I've done it, and I really like it. So again, I'm going to clean up the files here. I'm going to post them up to the D2L, and feel free to crank this up to run these things and maybe to experiment a bit by changing the values and those kinds of things. I mean, that's how you can really learn, okay? And again, I want to mention again, if you really want to use XQuery yourself and you want to learn more about the capabilities, the book to get is XQuery by Priscilla Walmsley, published in 2007 by O'Reilly Press. Okay? So I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.